Hey, happy Wednesday, everyone. Looks like we're just waiting for a couple people to join. I just want to acknowledge that they've decided to mow the lawn at this moment, which was the perfect time to mow the lawn. So hopefully that will pass. I may mute here and there so we don't miss the beautiful messages from my friend and colleague Heather. So we'll just wait for another moment and get started. And as Liz mentioned, I welcome everyone to. I always do this. That's a preview of next week. We're not there yet. We haven't finished the conversation. I encourage everyone to share in the chat, say hello, introduce yourselves, where you're joining us from. What you do. If you have anything you want to share about an event you're doing, by all means share. This is an opportunity for us to all be in community together. Okay. Looks like we will get started. Okay. Again, welcome everyone. Happy Wednesday. I am so delighted that you've joined us for week 11. Is that what you said, Liz? It was week 11? It has flown by. Of course, the pandemic seems never ending. And I love, we have this is the mowing, I'm going to think of it as the soundtrack of our lives, which now enters all of our work conversations. Sometimes it's kids, sometimes it's dogs, sometimes it's cats. So Heather, I know, has cats, and I have a dog, so they may make appearances. And actually, Liz has one dog or two. Is it one?
I have two dogs.
Two dogs. So, so those are our kids. So they may join us. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who are here for the first time, Hummingbird Humanity is an organization that endeavors to work with companies and organizations to create human-centered workplace cultures. And this series is actually our launch series. This is Hummingbird Humanity was launched in early May, and it kicked off with the Hope, Heart, and Human Spirit series. So we're on our final 3 episodes, this week with Heather MacArthur, next week with Rhea Rada, and then we wrap up with Katie Mooney at the end of the month. And then we're going to take a break for August because everyone needs a break, and I hope you all are planning your summer vacations. Although vacation looks different, and maybe we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. I wonder if Heather's taking a vacation. So I'm thrilled that my friend and colleague Heather has offered to join me. Heather and I actually met through the Walt Disney Company. We're both former Disney employees or Disney cast members. So some of you may use that, have heard that terminology. But Heather was also my executive coach when I worked at the Walt Disney Company. And I learned so much from her. And there are things I learned from her that I still use today and I've shared with others. And there's also, we're going to talk about this, there's a Forbes article that she was part of writing. She is on the byline that I shared with so many people in June. And I didn't even realize she wrote it until after I'd shared it 20 times. And I said, oh my gosh, I've already invited her, thankfully. But I'm so glad that she's here with us. So Heather, welcome. I'd love for you to say hello. You may have some opening comments before we dive into our conversation, and we'll just I'll let you take it from there. Oh, we're still on mute there. It's okay. I do it all the time.
Okay. Hello, everyone. And just thank you for having me. Excited to be here. As Brian mentioned, I got the pleasure of meeting him. I had already left Disney but was coming back for I always say I'm on my own little rotation program as a consultant, and that's how I crossed paths with Brian. And it was a privilege to be able to work and do coaching, and we went through a good journey together. And so when you reached out for the podcast, I was excited to be part of it and excited for the work that you're doing.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, well, I'm so glad you said yes. And of course, actually, I was thinking, I don't know when the last time we actually had a conversation was. I know we've emailed and we've texted, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
But once you spend time with someone and working through coaching, you become sort of really connected, right? So it was of course very easy to reach out and say, Heather, we got to catch up and let's do this live. So why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone? I hope you all enjoy hearing from Heather as much as I've appreciated knowing her and learning from her. Well, before we get into Disney and work and all of that, like let's go back from you. There's some things that I love about you and your story, and of course, one of the first things that I learned about you was that you were a military veteran.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that part of your history.
Yeah, look, my last name's MacArthur. I come from a long line of military folk, and I grew up in a military town. I was actually very anti joining the military because I just saw kind of the other side of things when my dad was retired and what he dealt with as a retired veteran. And then one day it was like, I'm not going to get out of this small town unless I do this, and it felt patriotic, and I signed up for the Marines. And I was in delayed enlistment so I could finish my associate's degree. And I went in there. I was like, do I have to shave my head? And they were messing with me, and they were like, yeah, you have to shave your head. I'm like, all right, it'll grow back. I was so hardcore back then. And I was going in there, and they would have to, because we might talk about this later, but I've lifted weights since I was a little girl. My dad used to take me to the gym. So I was always heavier in terms of the weight because I had a lot of muscle on me. So I'd have to go in for weigh-ins, and they do the fat percentage because they don't want anybody too out of shape. So they'll shape you up pretty quick. So one day the Marine recruiter was late. I think back then they didn't necessarily take female recruits as seriously as hopefully they do now. And so he was late for me quite often. And Air Force recruiter was standing outside, and he asked me what my scores on the tests were, and I happened to test really well. And he goes, oh, well, why don't you come? It's cold. Why don't you come wait in my office? And I'm like, my brother had joined the Air Force. I was like, I'm not joining the Air Force. He's like, I have donuts. And I was like, I'll see you in there. And, it kind of went from there. He set me up for a linguist test. I did really well on that. And, he kind of lured me in with the whole alias kind of thing. Like, you're going to work at the NSA and do undercover. And, you might not even have to wear a uniform. You might, all this stuff. And so I just had this, even before Alias was a show, I had this imagination that was what my life would be. And it definitely wasn't, but it was an adventure. So.
Alias. We could just spend the next hour talking about Alias.
Yes.
Just for fun, right? How long were you in the military? Was it 4 years? Is that right?
4 years. Yeah, 4 years.
And then why did you decide to go back to corporate America?
Well, let's be honest. I wasn't going back to corporate America. I grew up in a small town, so I was working, 3 retail jobs before I joined. But I left the military. In all honesty, they wanted me to re-enlist. And I was tempted because they were going to guarantee me to send me to Germany. And, I was in my early 20s. I wanted to travel. But I had just spent this 4 years doing a job that I didn't enjoy. It was a lot of sitting on a computer, and I would get in trouble because I'd work a night shift, and I would, get my work done. And then in between I would talk to Navy SEALs and everybody else with my Cosmo quiz and be like, so what style are you? And so I'd get in trouble for these things. And I had a sergeant for a while that would kind of figured out who I was. And he would send me doing actually OD work without knowing it was OD work between NSA and the Pentagon and FBI. Because back then we didn't have the internet. It wasn't, if that's dating me. There wasn't a way to really track duplicative effort. So that's what I was doing a lot of. And so by the time he retired, and by the time I was up for reenlistment, the new sergeant had me really stuck to that desk. And so I decided not to reenlist because I thought I have no control over whether or not my brain is being leveraged the way that I want it to be. And he said to me, what about your patriotic duty? And I said, this is my only way to guarantee that I can do something patriotic that is for my gifts to be used in a patriotic way. And like, here, you're not leveraging what I'm really meant to deliver. And you could leverage me that way, but the military is just not set up to tap into people's talents that way. They plug you where they need a body, and if you've qualified for it. So then I left, and I thought I was going to be in the FBI. I watched a lot of Silence of the Lambs. I thought I was a Russian linguist. Of course, they're going to need me for the Russian mafia. And at the time, this was before 9/11, I qualified for everything. I was on a hold, and then they said, we really just want accountants and lawyers. And I knew I didn't want to be an accountant. I already tried that. I was bored out of my mind. No offense to accountants, bless your hearts for doing the job that you do. And so I thought I'll be a lawyer. So I took the LSAT. I test well on the LSAT. I'm a good tester. And but then I bought a book, and the first page said, if you were guaranteed success, what would you do? And I was like, oh, I'd work in LA, like around the movie industry. And okay, well, I'm not going to be a lawyer. And so, I tossed that. And at the time I was working at a call center, and I met a woman who was a consultant, and she said, I work my own schedule. I make over 6 figures. I said, I'm going to do that. And, kind of moved from there.
Well, and as I'm hearing you talk about this journey, what it makes me think of is, and I was one of these people, and sometimes I think I still am this person of, we can reinvent ourselves throughout the course of our adult lives, personally and professionally. And sometimes where we start isn't where we, certainly isn't where we end up. And you found your calling in what you do today. So that's exciting. Before I go back, I could go all the way with work, but I want to go back to the personal stuff first. You made a reference to this. Like, one of the things I remember most about you is when we would have breakfast. You would have like an egg white and like a piece of asparagus and like a half of a chicken breast or something. I don't remember what it was, but I mean, what I remember outside of those moments, which always did amuse me because I was having pancakes, you had such a commitment to self-care and your physical health, and you had ways that you made it fun for yourself as well. So can you share with us about that journey?
Yeah, and I want to be really upfront and clear about the kind of person I am. I am, everything that you just described was a challenge I put myself up to. I am definitely not I've walked a straight line when it comes to health and fitness. It has been a bowl of spaghetti, and that includes the carbs. So I had turned 40, or I was about to turn 40, and I had put on weight. I had gotten caught up with work and gone through some hard personal stuff and kind of not been in the gym and just really wasn't taking care of myself. And my journey with self-care has actually been tough because I didn't grow up with a mom who took care of herself. She took care of others. And, I didn't see that physical self-care and health. My dad did, but he got Parkinson's disease when I was 4. So very quickly, I lost that role model that would go to the gym, that would go work out. And I always lifted weights. I always stayed kind of in that realm, but food was always something that I would turn to. So anyways, I had put on some weight, and I thought as a little girl, I always thought 40 was going to be kind of awesome. And I don't know why, but I just had that in my head. And I was like, I am going to be foxy in 40. And I was single at the time, and I had gone through relationships where it was like, someone wants me to be thin, somebody wants me to be curvy. And I'd get sucked into that. And so this time I remember looking in the mirror and going, what do you want to look like? And I'm like, I've always loved being muscular. I'm like, I'm just going to give that to you. And so for a year, I think my ancestors were Vikings and survived on a crust of bread while they trudged through the snow for miles and also fought battles. Like, that is how my body is set up. So any food it's very easy for me to put on weight, but it's also easy for me to put on muscle. So I had to really get disciplined in what I ate. The workouts were, strenuous, but that to me is part of the fun. It was the discipline on the food. And I think because I just was determined, I signed up for a bikini contest. I said, I'm just determined I'm going to do this. And I made it happen. I ended up doing a whole year of contests. And now I'm in a much more, I definitely have pancakes for breakfast at times, and I've not been on the discipline kick, but I've still, that's part of the reason that my boyfriend and we ended up moving down towards the beach, is just we decided that we wanted to turn the health into a way of living versus it being what I had done was this really intense kind of focus where it was work and work out, and which I don't think it's meant for a lifetime. But the journey of doing that taught me a lot about saying no to people. Like, I'm a people pleaser. So to say no, even though they're offering food or they baked something or whatever, was an interesting concept to learn how to say no and put my needs first and my goals first and not get caught up in am I hurting their feelings. And that was hard for me. That was probably harder than just not grocery shopping and putting in the bad foods in my house.
Yeah, I completely get that. And of course, I love to eat the bad food. Like that's how I'm programmed. But there's also I appreciate your honesty about sharing around being a people pleaser and
Yeah.
and figuring out how do you actually say to yourself like you deserve your own self-care and your own love, and what does that look like? And so that's a journey I can certainly identify with. And actually, you sort of just mentioned this, so I can't believe I didn't start with this. We're catching you in the middle of moving.
Oh yeah.
So for those of you, for those of us that are watching, everyone who's watching, listening, where did you move to, and why did you move there?
Yeah, well, like I said, about a year ago, we decided. It's funny because my boyfriend and I are both from the same small town. He ended up, stalking me on Facebook years later. After, I had left town, joined the military in my teens, and he stayed there, had a family, and I was just living the bachelorette life for a good 20 some odd years, and he was, raising a family. We're the opposite of what some gender roles would assume. And so then, when we started dating, he moved out. I was living in the Valley in LA, and we lived there for a year. The lease was up, and I was selling my property because finally it was, came up from being upside down. I did not buy real estate at the right time, that's for sure. And so we had this moment, and he looked at me and he goes, "Why don't we just live at the beach?" And I realized I'd been out in LA for 10, 12 years before he moved in with me. And I thought, as a little girl, I had always wanted to live at the beach. And my dad grew up in Dana Point, Laguna Beach area. And his mom and his dad had passed away. His mom disowned us because my mom was German. So it was an interesting, it's not the side of things that you hear often, but she was very angry at World War II, right? And I understand why. But because of that, we just lost touch with that side of the family. But before she kind of cut those ties, and before my dad got fully sick, we went there a few times. And I remember saying, "Why do we live in Barstow, where we lived? Why don't we live in Laguna Beach? Because it's the beach." And he says, "Well, we're poor." And I'm like, "Why aren't we poor at the beach instead of the desert? Like, let's just be strategic, Dad." And, I didn't grasp the concept. I'm like, we clean houses or something. I mean, there's poor people everywhere. Let's be poor at a good location. Strategic from day one. And so growing up, there was just this message of, that's not for you, that's for others. And so when my boyfriend said, "Why don't we just live at the beach?" it hit me that I had not given myself permission to do that, even though I lived in the area. And so we moved down here. It was about a mile off the beach, and it was a little bit bigger. And then our lease just came up this year, and we were like, "No, we're going to live at the water. Like, we can find a smaller place." And it honestly, it was a psychological, I still struggle with it, where I have this, I don't know if it's connected to what they call imposter syndrome, but I have these moments of like, am I pushing fate that if I really allow myself to have the lifestyle that I want, that, the universe is going to go, "Hey, I got to teach you a lesson. You don't get to have that." And, pull the rug out or do whatever. So I always have those little things that I have to manage. And so this is a little bit of an exercise of saying, like, no, you get to have, you help other people get nice things. Why wouldn't you? And there's plenty of people who don't like the beach. Like, it's not like I'm, like everybody loves this. It just happens to be what we really want to experience. So it's an interesting kind of, I feel like this year is going to be a year of giving myself permission. I've been talking a lot about the difference between surviving and thriving. And, I just grew up as a survivor. And so to really move into, my career has been in a thriving mode for a while. I've really made choices to get to enjoy my job, but the survival of my personal life, allowing myself to, you get to enjoy. Brian, you met me when I was single, and we've had conversations about that, and even allowing someone who, like my boyfriend now in my life, who is, very gifted at unconditional love. That is not my gift. That's his gift. And so to even allow that is, it's all new for me.
Well, I love that you're getting all of that. You deserve it.
Thank you.
So you referenced your career. I want to come back to this surviving, thriving in a moment, because I think that's an interesting conversation for the pandemic. But I want to sort of anchor it in I love the work that you do today. Can you share with us a little bit about what you do, how you spend time, both making a living, but also giving back?
Yeah, I call it kind of when I left working internally inside organizations, I wanted to do what I call the Robin Hood strategy of, when it comes to working for companies, I work with the partner with the firm, the executive advisory. I was really lucky to have met the managing partner from there, Joe Jokowitz. I met him as a vendor years ago when I was working at Princess Cruises, and we just stayed in touch. And he knew I had always wanted to go back. I'd done consulting a couple of times on my own, and he just said, when you're ready to come back out, let me know. And I ended up doing a really great kind of partnership where when it comes to working for companies, I partner with them and I do work through them. So executive coaching, training, team building, all those types of things that I did internally at companies. I ran learning departments. But now doing it where I feel like I'm not limited. I can go to any company out there, any group that needs me. It's kind of like, I like to think of like, I get to be a bee and go where the pollen is, so to speak. But on the other side of that, I do a lot of work around career, because coming out of the military, I didn't have family. I didn't have, parents who even graduated high school. So I didn't have this family who was going to guide me into my career or help me. I didn't have connections like that. All my circle of friends came from the same town, the same kind of level of socioeconomic, kind of background. And most of them hadn't left Barstow yet. So I wasn't able to there was just no one to tap into. And I had to figure things out. And as I figured it out, I realized, at one point in there, it was, I saw that there were such things as career coaches. And I thought, I'm coming out of the military. I have just enough money to maybe survive until I land another job. This is not the time to be price gouging me for like career stuff. Like this is the time that people need the help and can't pay for it. So now what I do is I have Low Men on the Totem Pole, which is my, what I would consider like my nonprofit business, or just the work that I do to help either veterans out of the military. I've even worked with people coming out of jail and trying to re-enter into the workforce. I work with domestic abuse survivors, but basically people that are in situations that just need help figuring out the landscape of getting a job and really aren't in the position to be able to pay someone for that. And so that's where I look to be able to give back. I wrote a book a couple of years ago to try to make it affordable, because I can't clearly be everywhere, that I can make it affordable for people to just, if I had a book like that coming out of the military, I could have read that and I could have figured out, a lot of different things and cut through a lot of the anxiety that I had.
So tell us a little bit more about the book, though. We have to take the book moment. The link is in the chat now. Is it for people who are just coming out of the military? Is it for everyone?
It is everyone. It is. I wrote it because I think of running your career like a business, and so two things I'd love to explain, and I'll try to make this quick. So Low Man on the Totem Pole, I came up with that name because I was with a friend, and Gladys Lars, I'll throw her name out there. She'll either respect it or get mad at me. But her daughter, we were picking her daughter up from school, and she came in and she had this big picture, and she'd drawn a totem pole. And her mom said, "Oh, what did you draw?" And she goes, I made a quip because I'm sarcastic, and I said, "Oh, she drew her mom, the low man on the totem pole." And and I'm chuckling, and her mom's like, "Wah." And her daughter, who's this genius, and now she's graduated from Harvard and whatnot, and she should run for president, honestly. Her daughter, Annika, said, actually, no, today we learned that the bottom of the totem pole was the most important. They would hire the best artists, and it's the foundation. And I just went, oh my gosh, that's what I feel about so many people that I work with when they tell me, and this is at all levels, where they'll say, I'm just a fill in the blank. I've heard I'm just an admin, I'm just a VP, I'm just an EVP. Well, I'm just the CEO. That's the board. Like, it doesn't matter. Someone has I'm just a, and they usually do that because of rank. And so I just thought, I love that concept. Low man on the totem pole. The bottom part is actually the most important. So stop, the little tagline on the book is stop begging for a promotion, start selling your genius. And that's the side of it where I realized through doing consulting is really treating your career like a business and being a business owner. And so the whole book is set up around how do you get clear about what business you're in, what impact you want to make, what your service standards are, and how do you create a book of business. And that could be a book of business in the company that you're working in, or it could be that you're sitting outside and you're doing consulting, and how you write your resume, like a marketing piece versus a history lesson. And so all those things are in there so that you're really treating your career and really able to look at it. And I find so many people, we've talked a lot about this in our coaching. One of the things that's in there is if you're a business owner, then your manager's not your boss. They're your primary client. They're the one that is paying the most for your services. And when I see people shift from treating someone as their boss, because the boss, it's either I'm scared of you or I resent you. Whereas a client is, I don't have any expectation. There's no book that says how a client should show up. There's tons of books on how a boss or a manager should show up. So I go to this well, and a lot of times it's empty because they're not bringing me what I was told I was supposed to get. But a client well, what you do is you go and go, what's in the well? What can I use? And what do they need from me? And it's tailored to the person versus this expectation that I got out of some book. And I just find people much more strategic when they're engaging that way. So that's the whole book is set up that way. It's if you're changing your career, if you just want to get more strategic about it, or if you are in a situation where you've been furloughed or have lost your job and you really need some help to figure out how to get moving on being job secure.
I love that. And I still remember those conversations around serve your boss as your client. And as I was sharing in our prep conversation for today, I've translated some of what we talked about in this box framework is the way I've thought about it since then. Of there's a box of being the boss, or being the coworker, or being the employee, or being the manager, or so on, or being the HR person, or being the marketing person, right? Like we put people in these boxes, and now I actually try to spend a lot of time thinking about, well, actually they're humans before we put them in any box. But we expect them not to be human once we put them in that box. We expect them to be a robot who follows the rules of that box. And that is not helpful to anyone because they're humans first. And that client, thinking about it as well as sort of, you think about them as a person, if you think about them as how do I serve them? How am I of help? Which is the language I use now is how can I be of help? What does that look like? And I find that has helped me and navigate some of those ways that I was working before, where I'm like, you're not following the rules of that box you're in. And they're like, I don't know what box you're talking about, but I'm just this person who's in this job. So I love that. And the other thing that I remember learning from you that I loved as well, which I have carried with me and shared with others, is this concept of you're going to stay at the same level until you're ready to go to the next level. I think you refer to Donkey Kong, if I remember. It's usually your answer. Yes, I still remember. So tell the group about what the leveling up sort of conversations about.
Yeah, so I actually do work with gaming companies, so I hope they don't hear this and judge me too hard. But the last game I was good at was Donkey Kong, and so that dates me as well. But what I love about, for those of you who remember Donkey Kong, you'll get this, and for those of you who don't, Google it or go find some retro, gaming plays. But you do this level, and the first level is the Donkey Kong throws barrels at you. And, look, I think there's some sexist undertones. I don't know why the girl just keeps, dating the wrong guy. And every time you get through the level, she's still with him. So clearly that's not a good lesson, but that's for another podcast. But he's throwing barrels. And the whole point is you have to learn how to jump over that barrel. Because at the next level, when you finally do get to the top, it takes you to level 2. And at level 2, it's barrels and it's fireballs. So if you didn't figure out how to jump over barrels, you're really going to have issues with barrels and fireballs. And so what I reference to people is I feel like life is a bit like a video game, and whatever challenge is getting thrown at you, instead of trying to it's that person that's the problem, and if they would just leave. My experience has been that person is showing a pattern. It is your wheelbarrow. and you have to figure out how to work with it and how to jump over it or how to use it. And if you don't, and you try to bypass it, you're going to find yourself in a situation that's higher level risk, higher level, importance. And this time there's going to be fireballs. And if you didn't figure out and really embrace, so I always say, if you've got someone who's driving you nuts, thank them, because they're presenting you with your trigger points. And instead of trying to just avoid them or squish them or get them to go away, really look at, what is it that I'm being asked to learn how to do, let go of, or walk around or use, so that the next level, I actually am skilled at this and it's not something that can get in my way.
I love that. I love that. And, and like I said, I still talk about it. I still share it with others. The other thing that I don't remember us talking about at the time that I'm realizing I took with me is, you can get to the next level and then you might struggle again, because you got to figure out that level, and then you get to the next level and then you're going to struggle again. Because, I have not shied away from trying new things, from challenging myself, from taking new adventures. And sometimes I'm like, why isn't it easier? But I'm like, I'm not going to stay on the same level. I want to keep growing and learning and trying new things. And what I have found is I love doing that in the spirit of serving others and trying to make the world a better place so everyone can feel respected and feel safe in the environments that they work in. But that's a shift. That's not where I was when we worked together. I was doing some different work, right? And so there's that sort of thinking about, we're always trying to level up in our own way. Or hopefully you are, or you can, is maybe another thing for someone who needs to hear, like, it's possible, you can do it. I think it's a helpful way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole growth mindset thing, which is easy to toss around, but when you actually are going through it, I know that I've had moments, especially in consulting, where you have to get good at understanding what you look like and feel like when you're learning, genuinely learning, not picking up something new that easily fits in a shelf that you already had. Because that's expanding maybe, but that's not really being ripped apart and starting from fresh and learning how to walk. And what do you look like as an adult learning to walk? And as it always fascinates me, because I use this analogy of, like, if a little kid starts to walk and falls flat on their face, we all kind of, oh my gosh, they're gonna be geniuses. And we're so excited because all we needed to see was the attempt, and we trust that the attempt will lead to walking and running eventually. We see adults, and if they take a step and they fumble and they fall on their face, it's like, who hired this person? Why are they here? Well, don't mess my game up, and the reality is when did we lose the faith that the attempt and the steps would lead to success? We absolutely have blind faith in these kids who honestly haven't done anything for the world yet, if we want to be clear. Like, they're just dirtying diapers and being greedy eaters. Like, they've contributed nothing to society, but we could meet a 30-year-old who's maybe gone to college, has volunteered somewhere, had a job somewhere else and did pretty good. And if they mess up, it must be a sign that they're a bad performer. And we just lose that sense of, like, what does learning look like? And I've had where I managed teams and I had to protect them from other managers because I might send them into a meeting on my behalf, and so that they can expand and get better at something. And I had a manager once say to me, he's like, well, you need to send your team prepared. And I'm like, first of all, I'm sending them to an organization. We're all under the umbrella of learning and development. I was at the time. And I'm like, this of all places, if it's not safe to show up here and not have everything together, then what are we doing for the company? There has to be room for that. But I also think as individuals, we have to be self-aware to know, what do we look like and feel like when we're learning, so we can go easy on ourselves. And, it doesn't feel good as an adult to be out of that comfort zone. And if you don't recognize that's what's happening, it's easy to go, this must be bad for me because it doesn't feel good. I'm going to go back to my comfort zone.
Yes, that default of, I need to feel safe again.
Yeah.
How do I get back there? What does that look like? Yeah, and actually, there's a thematic element, I think, in some of what we've talked about, is this well, and of course, the company name is Hummingbird Humanity, and humanity is the essence of this. And humans make mistakes. Humans sometimes get it wrong, right? And I have lived in those moments where I wasn't allowed to be human, and those it's hard, right? But I really tried, and I'll learn, and I'll do better next time. But it's and I have the leaders I've worked for who allowed me to be human. One of my the gentleman who hired me at Tapestry, the last company I worked for, Stu Robertson. I remember there was an email I sent that there was a typo that like you had to like click on an attachment and like go on page 2, and like nobody was probably ever going to see this, but I found it and I sent him a note and I said, hey, I'm really sorry this happened. And he wrote me back. He said, Brian, perfection is not the minimum standard.
Mm.
And that was incredibly helpful for me, because the reality is I made another mistake, probably more than one after that. But I remember that my boss has said, in his own words, you can be human. And the other person that comes to mind for me is Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, who, when she talks about that her father, if I remember correctly, her father asked her every week, what did you fail at this week? So she was taught from a young age that trying new things and learning from failure was actually a definition of success.
Yeah.
Which I think is beautiful.
Yeah, there's, if I could, because as you're talking, there's like 3 little things I'd love to share. Is one, I'll go off of the Spanx one, is when I worked in call centers, credit collection. So everyone we're calling is angry, and they, the people who are calling get a lot of abuse. So it was my job to make sure that they felt safe when they got off the phone. And so I started this thing called it was based off the movie thing, the Razzies, the Raspberry. And I had like this really ugly trophy. And every week people would have to compete for what's the most creative mistake that you've made this week. And my whole thing was, I don't care if you make a mistake, just be audacious and unique with it. Don't just keep making the same mistake every week. That's just lazy. But if you're really kind of ambitious and trying to do great things, and you come up with a really hairy mistake from that kind of thought process, you get a trophy, because that means that's going to cause innovation. We're going to evolve. So I always loved that, of like, and from that, I was never the person who got things right. My brother is an engineer. He's very much like my mom. They're both very analytical. So they were very much about accuracy. And I was a messy kind of artist feeler kind of person. So even if we painted, my brother could look at something and almost do an exact replica. And I was, some cheap version of Picasso, where everything was slanted, nothing ever measured up. And so I never had these moments where I delivered perfection. And I actually am a very slow learner. I'm good at picking out patterns. Another reason why I'm good at testing. But until I get the pattern, I'm lost. And so my patience for people learning, I know what learning looks like. It doesn't bother me. So I'm actually good about, it's okay that I don't have this perfect. And I at one time, I had a technical mistake where my calendar didn't sync up correctly, and I was 30 minutes late to a session. And the person who was coordinating that session, her and I had worked together for years. And afterwards, I said, I'm sorry, I dropped the ball. I'll reach out to the client. I'll let them know that it was me. And she said, I'm very disappointed in you. And I stopped. And this is where I'd say, like, you also, this idea of letting, managers who let people be human, you have to teach the world that you let yourself be human. Mm-hmm. And so when she said that to me, she said, I'm very disappointed in you. And in my head, I'm like, look, I didn't care if my mom was disappointed in me. So you didn't raise me. There's no room to be disappointed in me. So what I said to her was, it sounds like you're disappointed that this didn't happen and I dropped the ball. So what you're disappointed about, I'm happy to discuss. If you're disappointed in me as a person, you have the right to do that. I'm not interested in engaging in that dialogue. Mm. And, and I think she kind of just, we had a pretty good relationship, and I think she was surprised that I had such a hard line with that. But I was like, I had a rough family growing up. And so when I came to work, that was my safe haven. Nobody gets to pick me apart as a human in my work world. You can pick my work apart all day long. Like, you paid for that. You can tell me how horrible it was. It's not going to feel good, but you don't get to pick apart me as a human. You You haven't been there in the nights where I was all alone. You haven't been there with the 4 jobs I was working to put myself through college. You don't get to be disappointed in me because you didn't support me building this life. And I think I see people give away their dignity in performance reviews, or whether or not they get a raise, and they basically they're taking in what people are saying about them. Even someone saying you're a poor performer. I'm not a poor, I'm a unicorn. I'm an enigma. But that performance could have been bad. That performance could have not delivered. But me, I'm an amazing performer. Like, you can't, this idea of high performers and low performers, like, it's ridiculous. You're rating humans. And to your point, humans come first. Everyone's imperfectly perfect. You don't get to carve those people up.
Well, and in the spirit of we're all human, the last 6 months have really reminded us of our humanity. And so much of what we're talking about, what you've just shared, reminds me of, we have all been trying to figure out how do we, using language you used earlier, how do we survive or thrive in this, not just survive in this environment. And I want to segment. I'm talking about the pandemic. I do want to come to Black Lives Matter, which is an important conversation. But knowing the work you do, I have no doubt that people are calling Heather MacArthur and say, Heather, I don't know how to deal with this. I have to work from home. I've lost my job. I've been furloughed. I feel like I'm trapped. I have kids that I'm trying to take care of while I'm trying to work. There's this collection of things that are happening, and there's a list of others. How have you helped people thrive? What are the words of wisdom you've shared with them? Not to set you up with any, like, you have to be wise now, Heather. But
well, you didn't say I had to give good wisdom. You just said, what am I saying? So everybody else can judge it for what they want. Look, there's a lot going on, and I don't want to downplay that. And I know what it's like to be, for lack of a better description, in the corner, sucking your thumb by yourself, going, Jesus, am I gonna, be able to manage getting through this? And that panic and that fear. And so I don't take that lightly. And people who have gone through furloughs and aren't financially set up for that, I feel that on a very visceral level with them. But the main thing that I've seen work, and that people forget, and it's, we've talked about this before, is we end up sitting in the passenger seat and looking at everything, the driver, whoever the driver is the economy the driver? Is it my boss that's the driver? Is it my kids that are driving now? And we're sitting in the passenger seat and freaking out about it and complaining that this is not where we want the car to go, but refusing to get in the driver's seat. And so, for a different analogy, what I say is when the ocean is storming, if you're in, you have to remember you're in a boat and it's your boat. And if you just sit there and your whole goal is to survive the storm, you will not have the resilience you need to get through that. You have to decide that you are going to sail somewhere. There's no guarantee you're going to get there. There's no guarantee that you're going to accomplish what it is, but you need to set sail for something. And so in the midst of this, of job loss, of everything else, you've got to go, a year from now, I am committed to having this as my life, whatever that is. And then you set out to go after it. And what that does is it shifts all the storms from being your goal being to survive them. And what you realize is they are the obstacle course you're on. And so then you decide, is this something that I put energy into? Maybe I don't need to read every article about COVID right now. It's not going to help me get to point B by next year. And so even like with the information that people are taking in, because I've just seen people just tear themselves apart and trust me, myself too. I got sucked into all the news and wanting to make sure that I was being informed. And especially, we mentioned Black Lives Matter. I didn't want to sit there and be ignorant, and I didn't want to sit there and be precious and be like, oh, this is so hard for me to read. It's just too much. But I had to think through, and I finally went down. It's whatever information I take in, it should be helping inform my decisions to meet these goals that I'm after. And if it's not helping me inform my decisions, then I have no business reading it, because it's not going to help what I'm meant to do. And it moves you to an internal locus of control, which is a fancy way of saying that your decisions and your view of the world is based off of what you're doing to get to where you want to go. And it's all off of what can I do right now? How do I want to tackle this thing that's sitting in front of me? Versus an external locus of control where I'm stagnant and it's all about everything coming in, and it's either I'm lucky or I'm unlucky. And that is the highest stress state to be in, because it's everything is about things you don't control. So instead, to just say, just trust, if you sail towards something, you'll figure it out. Then all of a sudden, the loss of job isn't this enormous thing where you're becoming neurotic. And believe me, I've been laid off, so I'm not talking from a lack of experience. This thing that's just eating apart your sense of self and your ego and all those types of things. It goes, okay, so currently I don't have a job. I want to be here by next year. So do I need to get a job? And if so, what kind of job do I need right now? Do I need a paycheck right now? Do I need the career of my dreams? Like, what do I need? And you become much more resourceful because you're doing it on behalf of something bigger than your current state.
I love that. Well, and there's a couple of things that sparks for me. One is one of the commitments I have, and I feel like this is something we may have talked about as well, but it is endeavor to be part of the solution and not part of the problem, is something that I really put myself, remind myself of, and sometimes it's on a regular basis, which is the other thing that what I was hearing you talk about is this, that there's an intentionality that has to be ongoing, to be clear about where you want to be or what's important to you, and continuing to actively make choices that are aligned with your values, your goals, what's within your control, accepting what's not within your control. But that it happens on an ongoing basis, and when you do it with intention, then it can become second nature, and it's not as always as conscious because you'll naturally do it, but it takes intention, and it's easy to get pulled aside. That if you're in the ocean, that wave can come and pull you aside, and all of a sudden you're back in, like, I have to survive, and you have to say, no, I'm here to get to my destination. You have to say, I have to go back to that.
Yeah, and there's two things with that. Like, look, if I've had people go, Heather, I can't even imagine a year from now. I can't because really that requires hope. And what they're basically saying is, I don't have enough hope and optimism in me to think beyond, to a year. So then I say, okay, can you give me 90 days? What could you focus on doing in 90 days? I don't have that much hope and optimism. Give me a week. What could you do this time Sunday that you're going to promise yourself you're going to get to? And there are people who are dealing with heavy, heavy depression. And I will say, give me a day by this evening. So whatever amount, bite size that you can take, you will eventually stretch yourself into larger levels of hope and optimism. When you start to see that you do, what it really is it's not about the environment. It's that you teach yourself that you can trust yourself. That if you promise yourself you're going to move towards this thing, you see yourself do it. And the more you see yourself do it and figure things out and be resourceful, you realize the environment's not in charge. I am. And trust me, I've had traumatic things happen that I can sit there and go, like, look, that environment came at me, and it came at me hard and fast. But in that moment, then did I let all those traumatic things happen in moments, but they stay for weeks and years sometimes because we let it just kick us in the teeth, and we are blaming ourselves, and we're not trusting ourselves because something came out of left field and we don't know how to move forward. And instead, if we go, I trust that I will be there for myself. Like, I went through an audit a couple of years ago when I had gone out on consulting on my own. It was 2008, and the IRS was auditing anybody who was independent contractor. But when it first happened for me, I was like, oh my gosh, they think I'm Wesley Snipes. They think I didn't file my taxes. They, like something bad's going to happen to me. And then it turned out, okay. But what I realized was the final meeting that I had, this was after one auditor got arrested and like another one got fired. Like there was this whole thing, and it lasted for like a year and a half. And it was just, I was so stressed about it. And I show up, and the woman who did the final audit, before I met her, I was in my car, and I don't have kids of my own. And at the time I didn't even have stepkids myself. I'm like, if the little girl version of me was here with me, and, and I go back to my mom used to not shield us from anything, including her neuroses. So I just grew up stressed about a lot of things at an early age. So I said, if I had a little girl I wouldn't do that to her. I wouldn't sugarcoat the world, but I definitely wouldn't traumatize her. So how would I behave if this little girl was at this appointment with me? So I looked over. So now people are going to go like, we can't listen to her. She's crazy. But I looked over at her and I went, I said this out loud. I was in the car by myself and I said, mom's got an appointment to talk about some financial stuff and we're going to get ice cream afterwards. And then I went into this IRS office and you see all these people who just look miserable, like someone just shot their dog. And I sat there and with this little smile and I would look over at my side and as imagining that my daughter was there and going like, in my own head, I'm not that crazy, like, okay, well, almost ice cream, just be patient. And then I went in to go have that meeting with her. And this woman, it was amazing because like she had these little posters of like, hang in there. And, it's Friday. And she was going through all my paperwork and she goes, well, we've just been, bleeping with you. Like she said that like harshly to me. And she's like, you've just been raked over the coals. We owe you money. And you did everything fine and you should go. This is actually why I started to go back out to be a consultant. She's like, don't let them scare you out of doing business for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I went home that night. I slept for 3 days solid other than to get up to go to the restroom and grab a sandwich. But I was like, for a year and a half, I'd raked myself over the coals and really been scared and panicked. And in that moment, I was finally good to myself in that last meeting. Now, maybe it wouldn't have turned out well and whatever, but I, through that year and a half, terrified myself. I told myself horror stories and it all worked out. So what's funny is 2 years later, I went back out on my own. I get audited again. And now I've incorporated or whatever, and they've left me alone. But I get audited again, different woman, and she calls me up, and I said, "Look, this is going to be a math problem. You and I are going to sit down. We're going to go over the numbers. If I owe you something, we'll figure out how to get you the money. If you owe me something, you'll get me the money. If we don't owe each other anything, we'll wish each other well, and we'll move on." She goes, "You're the calmest person I've ever met during an audit." And I said, "I refuse to let this tear me apart again." And I'm the one that did that. And through all of this with the COVID, and those are legitimate concerns, but then why are we dogpiling on top of ourselves this additional story about the future and all the horrors, when the reality is that it could be amazing. Beautiful things could come out of this. So while you're writing yourself your fictional story, like pick the one that actually is going to help you be resourceful and resilient, not the one that's going to make you lock yourself in a closet and cry all night.
Because that's not helpful. No, of course I say that in jest. I mean, because I have, and you referred to this earlier, I have dealt with and battled anxiety and depression, and it's been debilitating at moments. And I have been in that place in those days where if I can actually just get to lunchtime and I can walk outside, like that's actually good. And you know what? Tomorrow I'll get to 3 o'clock, and and eventually each day, if I keep taking some steps forward, it'll get a little bit better. Yeah. So I appreciate you acknowledging that as well, because that's real, right? For those individuals who battle that, it's real.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. So I want to make sure we talk about Black Lives Matter. It's certainly something we could spend the entire hour on. But as I think I mentioned earlier in the conversation, you wrote an article that was, as I was trying to respond and be of help to people who were reaching out to me, of like, I need to have conversations and I don't know how to do it. And I was looking for a resource, and I was sending the article that you wrote, and then I realized later that you had written it, and that was really cool, of course, but I think it's so helpful. And we don't have time to talk about the entire article and message, but there's a phrase in there that I really like about compassionate curiosity, which is something that what I've tried to tell leaders is, because they're like, we have to take action, but we know we don't want to get it wrong. And I said, listening is action and understanding is action. Try to understand. So, which is compassionate curiosity. Can you share just a little bit about what that means?
I can, and I want to make sure I refer to Kwame Christian, he's this amazing gentleman that I met on a podcast years ago, and he was offering during this Black Lives Matter a podcast that he was going to give around how to think about this. He's a lawyer. He used to work in civil rights, and now he trains people on negotiation. And he had actually been trying to avoid these types of conversations because his time in civil rights had just really drained him. But his wife kind of goes, now's the time for people to hear from you. So I sat through his podcast. It was amazing. And he took a lot of his negotiations training and kind of used it for how to have conversations about Black lives in the workplace. And so I asked him, would you do an article with me? And so we collaborated on that. And a lot of the wisdom that he shared, I think, made that article as authentic as it is. With the compassion and curiosity, I think the biggest thing with that is, if from an ally's perspective, I think to have the compassion and the curiosity, to have the compassion for yourself, and to get, like, if you're sitting there, I had moments of, discomfort and shame. And I thought I was this, the concept of being non-racist to anti-racist, having that realization of, yeah, I speak up in a crowd, but I'm not out there advocating to the level that I should. All those types of things, it's have compassion with yourself so that you'll go through it. Because if you don't have compassion with yourself to go through it, you're not going to do it, and you're going to avoid it. And then when it comes to talking to people who are marginalized groups, to have the compassion, and I saw this with the Me Too movement, when I saw men, I was sexually assaulted in the military. It's a story that I've talked about before. And during that time in the late 90s, it was never a question of let's have that person, handled. It was a question of, how are you going to survive this? And what did you do to get yourself into this? So women will always, have compassion with me because we're in this together. But during the Me Too movement, when I saw men speak out against this, that they were appalled, that they were disgusted by this behavior, it did so much to heal me to see men speak to that I know, and to me, those were the allies that I needed. So I know that feeling, and what, to have that compassion and that curiosity to understand what your Black colleagues are going through, have been going through, and maybe you are aware of some of it, but there's no way you have the capacity to be aware fully what they experience. So to have that compassion and curiosity to just, I think we saw it with the Me Too movement, where people finally just said, believe victims. And it stopped being this whole, I've got to somehow convince you this is really happening. It was amazing to just be able to say it and people go, okay, that happened to you. For years, I had to kind of explain, and there's questions. And so to just get to a place where we believe our colleagues that these are their experiences, and not try to go like, well, maybe you took it the wrong way. Like, no, like, just believe them. This is what they're experiencing, and assume that they have the expertise that you don't. And I think if we can, it's a lot to ask of our Black colleagues to have compassion and curiosity with us, because they have had to have it for so long. The truth of the matter, though, is, even I thought of this during the Me Too movement, is we can't just, as much as we have a right to be angry, we can't just be angry right now, because this is our time. And if we shut the door on the people who are finally showing up and trying to figure out how to be allies, even if they suck at it, like, we've got to be able to be at least receptive to hearing it, so that there's space for them to build numbers around us. And that's a lot to ask. And I'm not telling people to turn away from their anger and emotion or whatever. But I do think this moment is different than the blips that we got of attention to Trayvon Martin, to these moments where maybe it was on the media for 24 hours and it was gone. I think this is a lot like the Me Too movement. Me Too movement didn't fix everything, but it radically shifted the conversation. It radically shifted what was okay and what was not okay. And it cracked things open in a way that have never been cracked open. I think that's where we are with Black Lives Matter. This is not the end. It's not going to fix everything, but this is a critical moment in time for us to reach together. And I do feel like there are a lot of people out there that are like me, that unfortunately a lot of Black people probably didn't realize were on their side because we were too silent. And so it's time for us, those of us who've been, maybe we'll speak up if someone says something, uses bad slang in a party, but are we advocating? Are we changing policy? Are we really being visible so people can see that how many allies actually exist, and let them heal from that?
I love your passion, Heather. Thank you, and I share that passion. As those of you who've been here before I've had my moments on this series as well. The thing that you remind me of is that some people are new to this, and there's a leader. He's the chief diversity officer at Moody's. His name is DK Bartley. He happens to also be a Black man who is a phenomenal leader and DEI practitioner. And he was leading a conversation a couple weeks ago that I got to hear, and he said, "You know what? If you just got here, welcome. Thank you for coming. We need you, and we know you have to learn, and that's okay. We're going to help you, and we'll go on this together." So I love those messages from DK, because sometimes you could feel like I got here late, and then you can feel the guilt of that, and you're going to get it wrong, and that feels bad, and it's actually, we're just so glad you're here. So I think it's going to take all of us.
Yeah.
So I know we're a couple minutes over. I could talk to you for another hour. I will ask you one more question once we go through a couple of logistic moments. So if people want to reach out to you, how do they find you?
LinkedIn's probably the easiest. You can find me on there, or on the executiveadvisory.com website is easy as well. Those are easiest ways to contact me.
Awesome, fantastic. And I think we'll put those links in the chat. And I just want to make a plug for next week. I will be joined by Ray Arata, who is the founder of the Better Man Conference. So really into speaking, I didn't plan this, but since Heather was just talking about allyship and the importance of allyship, and men, and particularly white men, are so important in that conversation. And Ray is really behind a movement to bring white men and men as a group to the work of allyship and helping to further this conversation. So I hope you'll join us next week. It is at a different time. We're going to be at 12:30 Eastern time next week versus 3 p.m. So adjust your calendars, and hopefully we'll see you here next week. So the last question I just want to ask you, Heather, I like to end on just a personal note, is what brings you joy?
My cats. That is the purest, and I say that because my boyfriend and my family will say as well, nothing brings out like my purest sense of joy than the cats, because they're the safest living creatures I've been able to love, and they love me unconditionally, and there's just no fear there. So I think I just have pure access to all my heart and my joy and my childlike sense of just happiness.
I love that. Yeah, Bosco, my little guy, my pup, I get it. Like, he loves me. Even if I'm having a bad day, or even if I've gotten something wrong that day, he's still just happy to see me. Yeah. It's so nice. So I'm glad you have your cats. Well, Heather, I want to just end by saying thank you for the difference you have made in my life. Our time together was profound for me and special, and I learned so much that I've been able to take with me, and I'm incredibly grateful. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and likewise, and it's great to meet Liz as well. So, and everybody on this in the community here. So thank you. It's been an honor to be part of this conversation.
Thanks, Heather. For everyone out there, thank you for joining us today. I'm Heather. As always, I'm so grateful we get to spend time together. Let's think about how we can partner in the future. I feel like there's more to come for us. Liz, always a delight. And we're going to be sharing something tomorrow from Liz. So she helped us create some Black Lives Matter resources, which are fantastic. So look for those in your email inbox tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Be well and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.